They banged on my gate and laughed. They actually laughed. The rain was coming down hard when the HOA president pointed at my flood wall and said, "This little thing, that won't save you. Tear it down." Her clipboard was already out. Red notice flapping in the wind. Water was rising fast behind us, creeping along the street. I stayed quiet while she smirked and told the neighbors, "Watch how fast this guy begs us later." Then she did it. She ordered maintenance to pull the temporary barriers I'd placed near the drainage line, claiming it was HOA property. The moment they moved it, water surged forward, rushing straight past them. Shoes soaked, papers ruined. Someone yelled, "Turn it back!" But it was too late. The flow wasn't heading toward my house anymore. It was racing downhill, straight toward the HOA office. I looked at my wall still holding strung and said calmly, "You might want to check your doors." Asterisk, the sirens in the distance weren't for me, they were for them. By the time the HOA president realized what was happening, water was already sliding under the office doors like it had a mind of its own. She ran, heels slipping, shouting orders that nobody followed. Inside the building, alarms started chirping, then screaming. File cabinets tipped, desks floated. Someone yelled that the server room was flooding. She turned back at me, soaked and shaking, and screamed, "You did this on purpose." I didn't raise my voice. I just pointed to the notice still in her hand and said, "You told me to remove my protection." I listened. That's when the police SUV stopped behind us, lights flashing. She smiled again, like she'd won. "Good," she said. "Arrest him." The officer stepped out, looked at my wall, then at the water pouring into the HOA office, and asked her one quiet question that wiped the smile off her face. "Ma'am, who approved removing city-approved flood defenses?" Asterisk, her mouth opened, then closed. No answer came out. The officer's radio crackled as another patrol car pulled in, followed by a city truck with emergency lights. A man in a rain jacket jumped out, staring straight at the flooded office. "Who touched the drainage barrier?" he shouted. The HOA president pointed at me again, voice breaking. "Him, he built an illegal wall." The man didn't even look my way. He walked up to my gate, checked the metal tag, bolted to the concrete, and nodded slowly. "This wall was inspected last month," he said. "City permit. Federal flood compliance." Her face drained white. Neighbors started whispering. Phones came out. Then he added the line that made her knees buckle. "Actually, this wall redirected runoff away from the entire block." Water kept pouring through the HOA doors while my yard stayed dry. I finally spoke again, calm as ever. "I warned you not to touch it." She tried to backtrack. "Fast. That's not what the board decided," she said, waving her hands. Blaming, a misunderstanding. The city official didn't buy it. He asked for the HOA meeting minutes. She said they were inside the office. Inside. The office now filled with brown water up to the desks. A neighbor laughed nervously and said, "So, no records." That's when the official turned to the officer and said, "They removed a permitted flood control structure during an active storm." Her voice cracked as she yelled, "We have authority here," the officer replied, "not over city infrastructure." Then came the twist she never saw coming. The official looked at me and asked, "Do you still have the footage?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. The video showed her on camera, ordering the barrier removed, laughing while water rushed past. The rain hit harder, and the handcuffs clicked louder than the storm. Asterisk, she started crying the moment the cuffs went on. But it didn't slow anything down. The officer walked her toward the car while the city official replayed the video for the others standing there. One board member kept saying, "We didn't vote on this." She never told us. Another whispered, "She said it was fake." That's when the water reached the breaker panel inside the HOA office. The lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. Someone yelled that the insurance wouldn't cover intentional damage. The city official turned to me again and said, "You know this storm isn't done right?" I nodded. "That's why I built the wall higher than required." His eyes narrowed. I tapped the concrete and said quietly, "This isn't just for my house." Down the street, water began pooling around the HOA parking lot, trapped with nowhere to go. One of the board members looked at me and asked, almost begging, "Can you stop it?" I paused, then said the line they'll never forget. "You already told me to remove it. I'm not allowed to touch it anymore." Asterisk, that's when panic really set in. The rain kept hammering down, and the parking lot turned into a shallow lake within minutes. Cars sat half submerged, alarms dying one by one. The city official grabbed his radio, calling for emergency pumps, but even he knew it would take time. One board member snapped at him, "This is all your fault for letting him build it." He didn't even look up. "No," he said flatly. "This is what happens when you ignore permits you don't understand." Then he turned to me again and lowered his voice. "If the wall stays untouched, your side will hold, but the runoff will keep moving." I looked past him at my house dry, lights on, kids watching from the window. The HOA president was now screaming from the back of the cruiser, "Make him fix it." The officer shut the door and said, "He's not under any order." A neighbor muttered, "So we're just stuck." I exhaled slowly and said, there is one way to slow it down. Every eye locked on me, but it requires permission. From the city, not the HOA. The city official didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and made the call right there in the rain. While he talked, the board members stood helpless, watching water swallow the last dry patch of asphalt. One of them whispered, she said he was just some guy with concrete. The official hung up, looked at me, and nodded. You're cleared. Temporary diversion only. I walked to a sealed panel built into the side of my wall. Karen saw it from the cruiser and went wild, yelling, that wasn't approved, that's illegal. I ignored her and turned the valve slowly. Not all the way, just enough. The water shifted direction, easing pressure on the lot but still keeping my property safe. The official raised an eyebrow. You designed this yourself? I said. I used to do flood control overseas. Same mistakes. Different people. The pumps finally arrive, roaring to life. Neighbors started clapping, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One board member stared at the wall and said quietly, she mocked us, called it a joke. I locked the panel again and replied, jokes don't usually come with permits. Asterisk by morning, the storm was gone, and so was her power. Sunlight hit the soaked HOA office, doors warped, papers pasted to the floor like mud. The city taped the building off. A notice went up. This time not from the HOA. Neighbors stood around quietly as the officer removed the cuffs and walked her toward another car, this one unmarked. She didn't look at me anymore. The city official shook my hand and said, you saved more homes than you know. I watched my kids step outside, dry shoes on wet pavement, and felt the weight finally lift. One neighbor broke the silence and said, guess that wall wasn't a joke. I looked at the concrete, still standing, and answered softly, it was never about the wall. Then I added the line that stayed with them all. In this country, you don't get to laugh at someone's safety just because you think you're in charge. Asterisk 2 weeks later, a letter showed up in every mailbox. Not an HOA warning. A federal notice. Turns out, the footage didn't stop at her arrest. Investigators found out she'd blocked flood permits before, fined people for safety upgrades, and rerouted drainage to protect her own house uphill. The HOA board was dissolved the same day. The office stayed closed, locks changed, sign removed. One afternoon, a city crew came back not to inspect my wall, but to copy it. The engineer smiled and said, we're using your design for the whole zone, as they poured new concrete down the street. A neighbor leaned over and said, funny. She tried to drown you, to prove a point. I watched the water flow clean and controlled for the first time and replied, she forgot one thing. He asked, what? I said it without smiling. Real power doesn't shout. It prepares. Asterisk months later, during the next heavy rain, nobody panicked. The water came, loud and fast, but it followed the new channels, hit the walls, and moved on like it was supposed to. No flooded doors, no screaming orders, just calm. The HOA never came back. The neighborhood voted to stay independent, and for the first time, people actually talked to each other instead of hiding behind notice. One evening, as I stood by the wall, a veteran down the street nodded at it and said, you protected your family, and everyone else. I thought about that day. She laughed and called it a joke, and I looked at the dry homes, the kids riding bikes after the storm, and said the last line that made it all worth it. I didn't build this to fight anyone. I built it so no one would ever have to beg again.